Mark, I'm lacking motivation to get fit.
Really?
Yeah, I keep watching. I keep sitting here at night watching YouTube on body weight exercise in the garden, and I keep thinking, right, I'll do it tomorrow.
Right. Well, maybe small steps. If you visualise tomorrow that you're doing it, that's a start.
No, I've had the alarm set for the last 3 weeks and just put it on snooze.
Well, we've all been there many times.
My time will come.
You've been watching Tiger King, haven't you, Lee? Definitely. On Netflix. Tiger King. Have you been watching that? Absolutely trash, but it's quite good viewing, to be fair. Tiger King on Netflix.
What's it called?
It's called Tiger King. It's a very bizarre documentary, but it's quite enjoyable.
Not seen it.
A bit weird, isn't it?
Oh, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I won't spoil it, so you'll have to check it out.
I've not seen it. One of the lads has seen it and said it's good.
They're saying it's already one of the most popular documentaries of all time, and that pretty much sums it up, really.
Wow.
Right.
Ozark we've just got into.
Yeah,
I was considering that.
We're watching that. It takes a bit of warming up.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit slow, and then it gets going, and we're towards the end of the second series, and apparently the third series is blinding.
Yeah, I think we're number 3 or 4 on the second series.
Yeah, it's getting good there, isn't it?
He's pretty cool, the bloke, though, isn't he?
Yeah. So just waiting for a few people to drop in.
How long?
We're all right to take toilet breaks during this chat.
It's just a casual chat, so whenever you want, Lee, just up and go.
I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to do a bit of an intro, if that's all right.
Yeah, we've.
You tell me when you want to start. I kind of like.
With the people still just joining us, Nick.
Are they? All right. Well, as long as they know, because sometimes people think that maybe we've already started. I don't know. So maybe let people. Yeah.
I can't see any
people who are already here, then we are going to wait a few more minutes, maybe a couple of minutes. But
yeah,
you signal to go when you want to go.
Yeah, just a couple of minutes.
I'll do my little bit for what it's worth. So tonight I've done my Tai Chi, and I've also done the bit where you go on the street and you clap the NHS. And I'm glad to say that every week that we've gone and done that, there seems to be more and more people doing it. It's really quite interesting. You know, you would have thought that by now people would have dropped off and would have said, no, I'm not going to go and do that bit where you go and clap aimlessly into the middle of the nowhere outside the house. It's surprising that each time there's more and more people doing it, which is kind of
good.
Nice. It's sort of nice, you know. It's sort of like I don't know. It's a sign of people getting real, isn't it? It's really cool. I have to say that I had a absolutely fabulous conversation with Mark Nesti this afternoon. I like to prepare for these things, you know, as much as I love the idea of playing in chaos and things being unpredictable. I also quite like the idea of knowing what river you're swimming in. So I thought that with the likes of people like Mark Nesti and Lee and Marcus and Alex, I thought, well, as a sign of respect and humility, at least my job really is to try and at least be of service to this gathering and make sure that we're all, roughly speaking, on the same stage or the same page. So my bit, I'll have 5 minutes to sort of set the scene and let people know what they're in for, hopefully, or what they're not in for.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to start proceedings, Nick, we've got 56 joining us tonight at the moment. So welcome, everybody.
Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the House of Zen. Very quickly, for those people who, this is our second edition, for those people who joined us last time and you're stuck with us this time, thank you very much. It's great to see you, although I can't actually see you, but my name's Nick Middleton. I'm sort of like tonight's kind of master of ceremonies. I'm not going to be saying too much, only at the very beginning. This is actually a Marcus Bell production for Zen Golf Mechanics, and Marcus has put quite an awful lot of effort in to this, and he's taking it very seriously. For those who don't already know, the whole thing came about by Alex Bell. He contacted us and said, you know, is there anything we can do to counteract all the crap that's on the internet at the moment, of the kind of quick fixes and all that kind of crap to do with golf? Is there anything else that we can do, you know, maybe to challenge that a little bit, challenge convention, maybe explain a little bit about, you know, another side to golf, the dynamics of golf, and particularly an interest of mine is the contribution it can make to a long and enriched life. So, and at the moment, I'm sure that there's all sorts of people considering what life is ahead of us. So, as a general idea, a general theme, what we like to do is we treat it a little bit like it's like a jazz improvisation session, except for there's no musical instruments. It's just people's minds and what they express, and it's about being in the moment and about, you know, sort of trying to stimulate and thought-provoking conversation through the interplay of the invited guests. In terms of the house rules, you know, there is no exit, so don't try and escape. I think you're all unmuted. Those people who are actually speaking, I know that from my experience doing this before, that if you're not speaking, then the best thing to do is to unmute your mic. I tend to forget to do that, unfortunately, because there's always background noise and it gets picked up by these microphones. So for the people in the room tonight, and they are as follows: there's myself, Marcus Bell, of course. There's Dr. Mark Nesti. There's Alex Belt, who was the guy that instigated all of this. And our key guest tonight is Lee Sharpe, a footballer of some considerable repute, who happens to know all four of us. But through Alex Belt, that introduction was made. So I believe that Alex and Lee were playing in a pro-am, and as a consequence of that, I think I got to meet Lee. And after that, I think he got to meet Marcus. Everyone who gets to meet me gets to meet Marcus, because I think we'll all get to realise Marcus is where it's at. And of course, all the other people around us. And tonight, another special guest of ours is, by popular request, is Dr. Mark Nesti. A very rare bird indeed, because he's one of the very few people who straddles academia and the practice of performance psychology. And tonight's topic is kind of the dynamics of performance. It's a big, kind of broad, deep word. You mention the word performance and everyone thinks, well, you must be good. But I think tonight we're going to try and explore within the context of Lee's life and the questions from Mark. We're going to get to know a little bit more about one of the key sort of, I suppose it's the sound bites, you know, in performance and sport performance. And there's a few kind of like cliches that come out, kind of get trotted out. And one of them is, what's the difference that makes a difference? Thought-provoking, and people think, well, you know, is it the small bits that make the big bits? You know, but what it does do, a statement like that, is it stimulates a thought inside our mind, which is, as human beings, we are kind of like set to search and discover. It's kind of like part of our innate nature is that we are fantastic at searching better solutions. And within performance, if the difference is that makes a difference, then it's about selecting, and it's about searching and being very selective about where we go searching. Where do we go and look? And tonight we're also looking at, you know, what's our mindset when we go looking? Are we truly individualistic, or are we obeying another call to nature, which is we're simply obliging the pull of conformity and conditioning? Now, that's certainly something that I've spoken to Mark and Lee about prior to this session tonight. It's particularly pertinent because we've got Lee in the room, and in my opinion, what we've got is someone who's kind of very individualistic, and he's someone who's kind of done it his own way. And in Mark, we've got someone who recognizes the value of being individual and not necessarily being a small number in a very large equation. So the idea of being an outlier, the idea of being a bit different, is definitely ticks all the boxes from our point of view. So we're very much in that stream. And along that road, there's another thing that comes up in philosophy, which is, you know, why are we doing this? What is the big why in life? And the other thing that's really fascinating about, you know, the human species is that we continually trying to seek to find meaning. Meaning's a big word, like performance. It's kind of like, what do you mean by meaning? What's that about? You know, what do you mean by that? And within philosophy, there's just tons and tons of exploration just on the word and the semantics of meaning. What does it imply? And how does it influence our action and development? That's importantly. And ultimately, what does it mean for you? How do you find meaning? I think that in all search and in all ways and that we try to improve, ultimately, there's some kind of encapsulated concept of meaning. What's it all come to? Where does it go? For me, that concept of the word meaning and how it would apply to me I faced that in the very first lecture when I went away to college. And I was saying to Mark earlier today that we were herded into this room and into the lecture theatre. It's the very first lecture, and we were posed a question. Was Pele a footballer, or was he an artist? Or in fact, as Mark might suggest, was he a philosopher? Yeah. Moving on, in 1994, I had the next big wake-up call, and it was the World Chess Championships. It was a young upstart, a Russian kid called Garry Kasparov, and he was challenging to become the world champion, and he was taking on a guy called Anatoly Karpov. And it's a very, very famous match because it really ended up nearly killing each of them. The match went on for many, I think there were 40 drawn games, but for 5 months they were battling it out. And eventually, it's a long story, but eventually Kasparov, a 22-year-old, became the youngest ever world champion. And he, against all odds, from having a completely losing match, he managed to overtake and beat Karpov. And he crushed Karpov in the end. And what was a big thing for me, what brought meaning into my life, was he was asked the question, you know, because in the game that he finally beat him with, it was a game that no one had ever seen before. No one had ever seen these moves before. And they were asking him, where the hell did he get these moves from? We've not seen these. What were you trying to do? Because that's really risky to do in a big event like that. All you needed to do was just slowly move up the board because the guy was nearly dead anyway. And his answer was, I was just trying to create art. That's all I was trying to do. And the moves just took care of themselves. Now, I think there's some real resonance in that we can take forward. And then, you know, as I was reciting that to myself and talking to, you know, other people about that, I spoke to Alex this afternoon. And guess what? The first thing that came to mind was Mo Norman. We started talking about Mo Norman. And in the end, because of the conversation I had with Alex today, it poses another question, which is, was Mo Norman a golfer or was he a coach? one thing is for sure, he was probably the greatest golfer of all time. Like Pelé, you could say, was probably a great footballer, but he was also something else. He wasn't just a golfer. He wasn't just a ball striker. He was also an excellent philosopher. He was a brilliant inventor. And that's really what I think we want to explore tonight, is this whole area of, you know, what are the conditions for moving this thing forward? You know, we have to look at, you know, to find the difference, to make the difference. You know, we need to look at where are we when it comes to exploring being comfortable with the uncomfortable, the art of invention, exploration, innovation, how we lose ourselves to gain ourselves, and ultimately being comfortable with being eccentric. To do and to be great, you have to lose fear, and you have to just completely give up this idea that somehow that you need to conform. And I think that I'm really truly delighted that Lee has joined us tonight, because Lee is definitely, in my opinion, one of the non-conformers, one of the true eccentrics, one of the great inventors. And I'm really pleased that he's joined us tonight to actually share some of those memories from his life, and obviously interact with Mark and try and jazz this conversation up. So that's me done, and I'll only come back into the conversation if I'm invited, or there's a fight and I have to try and break it up. But Mark and Lee, welcome to the House of Zen, and thank you very much for taking part, and please feel free to open up and make this a memorable and a very different and a learning experience for everyone concerned. Thank you.
Fantastic, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
As usual, you've only asked a couple of very simple questions there, Nick. Nothing that we can't get through in 5 minutes, and then we'll be bored. So let me, Lee, if you don't mind, let me put this one to you. You're not expecting me to ask questions, but in the spirit of what Nick has been saying, this is a jazz session. So individualism and being individualistic. So let's assume that you were perceived, at least by some in the game, to be individualistic in your football career. How did you react to that? How do you view that now? How did you view it at the time? Did you resent that description of you? Assuming that was a way that you were described, I think it was at times. What's your take on that?
On me being individualistic. I think it sort of grew on me a little bit. I think you sort of have good games and people rave about it and say you're doing this a bit different, this a bit different. I think I probably used it and played up to the fact that I was a little bit different. I probably exaggerated it a little bit because I think deep down, actually, I sort of lacked a bit of confidence in my own ability. So the celebrations were just something to join in with the fans with, and a sort of celebration that I've just done something good. As far as the game I played and the way I played the game, it was the way I was brought up watching it. I remember watching Aston Villa in the early 80s in the European Cup final. Tony Morley, Gary Shaw, ball players, entertain the fans, got you on the edge of your seat. That's how I wanted to play. That's how. And I'm not sure about this. Was I born with it or was I not? I mean, my first memory from my dad is me playing in the Cubs team as a left back. And we're defending a corner, and the corner comes in. I'm on the front post, and the ball comes to me on the goal line. I control it, beat two players within the 6-yard box, and run out the penalty area. Everyone's screaming to kick it, and in the end, they went, "We've got to play him up front because he's too dangerous to play defence." So I don't know whether that's just watching my dad or whether it was just born in me. But I've always wanted to run at players, take people on. It's just what I've always found attractive in the game.
Could I just interject? Because it's interesting, Lee, when we met, when you said you're naturally right-footed. But
I'm left-footed, right-handed.
Your dad used to kick the ball to the opposite foot, didn't he? When you were.
Oh, when I was little, he used to have my dad lie behind, my mum lie behind me in the living room holding my left foot, rolling the ball to my right foot so I could kick with both feet.
That's it. Sorry, yeah.
Obviously never worked, but it was a good effort.
So whether that's come from, whether it's come from something that is special and unique to you, something that's in you, almost like in your DNA, if you like, your psychological being, or whether it's because of emulation of people who you've seen and for some reason they excited you. The players you're talking about at that Villa side in the early 80s, and others of a similar ilk, I'm sure, who they're taking chances, Lee. They're taking chances and they're taking risks, which mean inevitably that they're failing. So, when did you start thinking about failure? When did you start thinking about failure? When did that happen? Because there's lots of criticisms against, being a creative player, being a creative athlete, being a creative person. And one of them is that, the more creative you are, by definition, you are moving to the edge. You're moving into the unknown. And when you sit back and calculate that means almost inevitably there will be lots of moments of failure. So did you ever see it that way? Did somebody point that out to you? Did you resist it? What's the story on that one?
The thought of failure, I think, I don't know whether failure constitutes as, I used to have a bad game for my Sunday league team and sulk a little bit, go into myself. My dad used to make a bit of a joke of it. And so I used to go in a bit and think about it. So I don't know whether that was deemed as a failure because I've not played well. But as far as, I have to say, as far as managers I sort of played under, right through being at school and Sunday league and even to Torquay leaving home, I've always sort of played above myself. So I've never really had anything expected of me, but I've played for the year above. I played open age football when I was 15. Played for Torquay when I was 16. So everything's above my age. But because I'm so young, everything's sort of like just go and do what you want to do. So until I got to United and got into the team pretty early at 17, by the time I'm 18, 19, I'm expected to have had my mistakes ironed out of me. And then bad games become exaggerated. And then I'm getting the rollicking off the manager. So then I'm trying to protect a little bit of what's safe and what's not, I suppose. So probably like late teens, I was probably having the biggest failures.
So because of that, what you've just described there, and I know there'll be much more to the story than that, but just on that alone, that accelerated path with that, and it's not unique because Alex could jump in here because he had something in his own, transition from football to golf and how rapid he moved through golf. In that, when you move through something very, very quickly, and why wouldn't you? You're going to say yes, aren't you? You're going to, if the opportunity is there, you've got to say yes. You're not going to go, I'm going to hold back here because I'm going to miss certain things. But now that you can look back, so were you creating some problems? Is that how you might see it now? You're creating some problems for yourself that you couldn't see at that time, of course, but later on, you can actually see them more clearly. The fact that, now this is me using dramatic language, not psychology language, that you were cheating. It wasn't you cheating, but the fact that you accelerate through so quickly, you're playing out of your age group, which means as you put it, the expectations on you are not the same. If you have a couple of bad games, some bad touches, you don't get the scrutiny that somebody who does, who's not meant to be there because it's the right age group. So what about what's your feelings in that? I know you wouldn't stop it, but what's your feelings in terms of what that might do to an athlete? We're talking football, we could be talking golf, in terms of what you would miss, what you would not experience by virtue of the fact that it's all pretty easy. I don't mean completely easy, but pretty easy because, of what you've described.
Well, I like the easy route, so I would choose that route every time, and take the pitfalls that come with it. I don't know whether I'd rather scrap and fight my way up, and I don't know. It's a difficult situation. It's a difficult question for me to answer when. Yeah.
I'll put it another way then. If you were coaching someone, because we've got coaches listening here as well, and we've got people who are involved in teaching and coaching. So what do you think you would do? Partly on your understanding of what you've experienced and what you enjoyed and where it took you. But what do you think about, as it were, artificially, putting blocks in front of people, holding people back, if you like, trying to control things? What do you think about that? What do you think in terms of cost benefit analysis, if you like? Do you think there's more lost than maybe gained by doing that, or do you think that's necessary? If you're coaching, so a lot of managers, I've watched in football, you've been around the game and other sports, they will hold players back sometimes. Coaches will hold athletes back and say, no, I know you can deliver it, but I want you to truly learn, so I'm going to hold you back. What do you think about that kind of philosophy, which is out there?
Yeah, I understand, and I know there's certain managers and coaches that do hold people and players back. I think that's the magic of a good coach. I think he knows when the right time is. I think a lot of managers, good managers that bring young players through and help young players, I think they bed them in. I mean, especially in football, we had the class of '92 come through. They were bedded in. They'd play 2 or 3 games. They'd get left out for half a dozen games. They'd come in and be subbed for a few games. And over a matter of a season, they've ended up playing 15, 20 games. But it's spaced out, it's substitutes here, so you get sort of bled into it. It all depends on the character of the player as well. The character of the player's got to be able to take it on. Some people are a little bit younger in the head, or they don't take change as easy. I think you've got to be prepared to change. You've got to be quite level-headed to be able to deal with the change, I think, at times, which, sensible parents, a strong manager, a good coaching staff, all seem to add to the sort of whole package.
So if I think about, the various athletes and professional sports performers, different sports that I worked with over these last 35 years or so, and of course this is not in all cases, but in many of the cases, I think the major challenges, particularly as they get a little bit further into professional and higher level ranks, are kind of the things that are going on away from the pitch, off the pitch. And I don't mean terrible things. I don't mean awful things. I mean terrible things and awful things and really ordinary things. I mean the rest of normal life. And in terms of sometimes, again, this is not always the case, but the shock between doing something that you absolutely love and find pretty easy and straightforward and very clear, and then life, when the whistle stops, as it were, when you're off the training ground. And I'm not describing your experience, Lee. I'm talking in general terms. That's not what we're doing here. But in terms of preparing players and preparing athletes, preparing young golfers to understand that maybe some of the bigger challenges that they will face that will actually begin to make them more fearful will be to do with the things that happen, or at least what they perceive are happening away from when they're actually out there playing and performing. So what's this is maybe not a question necessarily for you, maybe some of the other guys could chip in here as well, but do you think we spend too much time when we're working with players and athletes actually worrying about the performance itself, the thing that you love doing, and not enough about your broader lives and about, if we use a word like holistic, it's the whole of you that goes out there. And if there's real challenges and difficult moments in your broader life, do you think that that's something that should be, coaches should try and tend to, others should attend to it, try and get the culture right? What do you think about that from what you've experienced, what you've seen?
Well, I just think it's a mental attitude. I think it's not, football is sport in general. It's not life or death, but it is a microcosm of life anyway. I think the ups and downs in sport are a lot like life, and I've always been one. It doesn't go down with too many people, but I've always been one that life's a game. Life's no matter what drama you want to buy into your situation, whether it's on a football pitch, on a golf course, or life in general. I think it's only your drama that you put into it that makes it as big or as small a problem that you want to make it. And I think that's a mindset for people that they need to learn. I think I think football clubs and sports people can be around people. It's all right learning technique, it's all right learning positional play in a positional sense, but I think if you've got someone that, I think we've seen top managers now like Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, the players are sort of at a sort of happiness level and content with themselves as people. They just go out and give everything every week, and they blitz teams. They're just too fast, too powerful, because they're mentally on just enjoying themselves. They know they've done the preparation. Everything's looked after at home. They've eaten right. They've trained right. They've got all the science and technology to tell them the science is right. Now they can just go out and just enjoy the moment. And they know as long as they're giving everything, as a collective, they're going to beat anybody. And I think it's a mindset, a coaching mindset, rather than a make sure he's all right at home, make sure he's. I think if you give people the tools to be able to deal with and make less drama, I think that's the way that we have a better society, really.
So it's basically, you know, in a very simplistic way of describing it, but it's trying to provide that culture, the culture you've just described, and then crucially setting people free to actually, you know, be themselves. Because, you know, we've been speaking about being individualistic, and one of the other, you know, words that, and maybe the athletes themselves don't use these words, but they use words similar to them in terms of wanting to be themselves. You've heard, and you will have said it to yourself as well, and you've heard others, you know, people that you've worked with say things like, look, all I want from you today out there is just be yourself. And because it's such a trite, very simple sounding phrase, everybody thinks, yeah, well, of course. I mean, what else? But it's actually really quite difficult to be authentic, is the fancy word, to try and be yourself, because there's lots of problems with that. One of the problems with that, one of the challenges of that, is that this is about responsibility as well. So it means that when you attempt to do something and it's you attempting to do it, you actually have to take responsibility, not just for the successes, but also for what might actually be, you know, deemed and real or imagined as failures. So that's a really difficult place and creates a lot of anxiety.
Yeah,
so,
I don't think you got to say just be yourself. I think what a good coach is, they let the player know what their attributes are. A good boxing coach doesn't sit in the corner before a fight and go, just go and be yourself. He says, you know, you've got an unbelievable jab, you've got a great hook, great movement, use your feet. You know, they give them all the core strengths of what the athlete's got. I don't think Pep Guardiola goes out and says, right, just go and be yourselves. I'm sure he's like, well, you're good at this, you do this. And when you've got it here, you can do this. And then the option is to do this. And so everyone's got things ready. And it's a coach that just sort of tips them, gives them that little bit of knowledge before they go out. That makes them really, really self-confident and believe in themselves. And that's when they can just relax everything out of the mind and sort of get into the focus of just allowing things to happen.
But that's the moment to be yourself, because it doesn't, because when people talk about this, particularly psychologists and philosophers and others as well, but even coaches, and you're quite right to pick it up, it sounds as though it means there's no need to go to the practice ground. There's no need to look at your grip. You just turn up. And that's clearly nonsense. You don't need to work towards a PhD. If you want to do heart surgery, you just turn up. No. It's and this is something I spoke to Nick about earlier. It's all the way through, not just sport, not just coaching, but maybe all the way through the culture. A kind of either or idea. And it's like, right, so if you work hard and you develop your skills and your physical capacity and your technique and all the rest of it, that'll be sufficient. And it's like, no, but it's not. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So you need to do all the work. You need to do all the training. You did all the training, whether it was the stuff you did as a kid and stuff you did formally and all the rest of it. But the paradox, big word, is that when you get out there, whatever the discipline is, whatever the walk of life it is, when you get out there, then ironically you perform the best when you actually get out there, by not dwelling on all that work that you've just done. I know your best performances did not take place with you thinking, right, I worked for 3 years on making sure that my my right foot is as good as my left, or left as good as my right, or I can strike this ball. That's not what goes into your mind. But it doesn't mean that you just turn up. So I think we often get this where it's like, if you work hard, really, really hard, you'll make it. Well, that's not the case. That isn't the case, but it doesn't mean don't work. It means you do the work, and then there's a moment, and that's what we were talking about a little bit last week. And this is a difficult moment for lots of people. Then the moment is, now it's like art. Now it's like, now I do what I do. And that's where coaches might put a hand on your shoulder and go, listen, today I want to see you out there, or something like that. And they don't at that moment, just as you go out and the buzzer's gone, they don't go, now remember the 6 things that we've been working on. They might have said that all the way during the week, but before you go out, it's like looking at you in the eyes and go, I want Lee Sharpe out there today. Stuff everything else, I want Lee Sharpe. And this is the paradox. That doesn't mean that you just go out and play like you did when you were 5. Everything that you've been, everything you've done now is going to be set free without you having to consciously think about it all. It's a strange paradox. If you're thinking back to it, think of some coach or manager you've had, or someone in your life, or you've watched someone where somebody has given them huge amounts of information before they go to perform. And you know what happens? They either choke, or they're so confused they don't move properly. And so this is a kind of an interesting dilemma of, what is the point of a coach? What's the point of a teacher? You never really coached and taught. I wonder if somebody wants to join in.
Could I just ask Lee, from a coach's perspective, what kind of training sessions did you enjoy, Lee? I mean, how much kind of technical application was there, and what kind of coaching did you enjoy? What did you find the most productive? How was it tapered for kind of performance up to a match, off season? Kind of what would it entail for you as an attacking player?
Well, the best, I mean, at United, we always did, there was always crossing and finishing to finish a session, which we usually a shooting session on a Tuesday or a Thursday, maybe, if there's no midweek game. Crossing and finishing all the time, little sided games, 1 and 2 touch, loads of 1 and 2 touch. And then there'd be a little bit of a blast of running. But we used to play that many games that the training wasn't that hard during the season. We did the hard stuff for 6 weeks pre-season. So yeah, it was always the crossing and finishing, shooting practice, and then obviously everybody loves the 5-a-side at the end.
So it was a kind of a games-based approach, but also when you were reflecting on your performances, kind of good and bad, particularly say what performances you weren't happy with, and I suppose the manager let you know that pretty soon after.
He let me know if I played good or bad. He wasn't happy if I was good or bad.
So yeah, he ran a tight ship. So when you go back to the training ground the next day or the couple of days after, what would your focus be? Would you have the last game in mind? Would they be saying, look, Lee, work on this, work on that? Would it get technical at all, or would it go back to more of a regular kind of generic approach?
No, it would generally be, my process would be play Saturday, and then mentally win, lose or draw, play well, play bad, a few drinks out with my cousin and my mates that have come up from Birmingham. And Sunday they go home. Sunday I generally lie on the couch, look at the TV, but not really watch it, and then just have the game, keep processing and running through my head, whether it was good, bad or ugly. And then the Monday would start the training. It would be, if I've played well, to keep up that standard. If I've played bad, to get my focus back, get my first touch right, and work hard in training again to get the performance back next game.
Can I step in there? Is that all right?
8 years there.
We've been covering the biopsychosocial side of things, and I think this is where this has been really interesting for Alex. Yeah, how does that relate to you as a tournament professional golfer?
Well, there's a couple of things there which have stood out quite interestingly, especially that last comment you made, Lee, about winning, losing, and then kind of reflecting on it both in the same way in terms of almost like reacting to it to a certain extent, and not so much dwelling on the defeat. But rewinding back to just what Mark said a minute ago, with regards to the managers and how much influence the managers have on the players. And I think that there is a direct correlation between football and golf in that regards, in terms of, I don't know if you will remember, Mark, we once had a session on the walls of York Castle. Do you remember that?
We do, yeah. Yeah.
And
2 miles it is.
Yeah, I distinctly remember you talking about, I don't know which battle it was won centuries ago, so maybe I should just refer to something like that we all know, maybe Braveheart, something like that. So let's talk about Braveheart for a second. In terms of all the people who were fighting, they weren't fighting directly for that flag, they were fighting for the belief that they had in Mel Gibson. So that kind of philosophy that players have in their manager almost like then creates this like energy of confidence, if that's what you want to call it, although I don't particularly like using the word confidence, but it creates something positive for sure. And also, if you're going to then try and correlate that to golf, it's a bit like a golfer then having to have the belief in their coach or a part of their team in order to then like completely believe in that, in order to develop their own philosophy and in order to then be like finding their own self. So it becomes quite individualized, even though it didn't spring from a direct question of asking you to just be yourself, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And that was always a common thread in, how many years did we're still working, but was it 10 years or whatever, right from the start, was the tension between, and it's always there, what shall I do? Just what Lee's been talking about. Shall I lift it up? Do I need to lift it up? To lift it up, do I need to do less? Do I need to do more? Do I do something different? Do I freshen it up? Do I go back to things I've forgotten about? All of that, whilst also strangely knowing that you can have, and Lee must know this because he's had this experience, you can have the best training week, the best 3 weeks on the range ever, striking the ball beautifully. You're laughing away because it's happened so many times in your life, and then you go out and it's a shocker. And it's a shocker for at least 3 days and maybe to the last 3 holes. And then, of course, then it's all gone. And then those last 3 holes are absolutely sensational. Or in football, in terms, if you're still on the pitch and you haven't been hooked, that's you, Lee. If you haven't been hooked.
I'm off by that point.
You're off by now, aren't you? He's hooked you now. But if he hadn't hooked you the last 15 minutes, if you're still good enough, it's like, shit, where did that come from? He's just done 2 people. He's nutmegged him. He's gone round. What's happened? And basically, if I asked you if I could get on your shoulder and then go, Lee, what are you thinking of? You go, sod all. And I go, no, you must be. You're playing in front of 75,000 people. What are you drawing on? You're like, no. I can't even describe it. How happy are you? Oh, I'm so happy. I can't even describe. And it's like, so are you going back to, now you might manage to blurt out literally one thing, which sounds ridiculous, but you might go, I'm just concentrating on coming short for the ball again and making sure that, or I'm just making sure that first touch is, as you know, such a big part of your game, making sure that first touch is the best it can be. Are you thinking about anything else? No, nothing. Or whatever it happened to be. So there's a weird paradox that you do all this training, all this preparation. We spoke about it last week. That still doesn't guarantee, because we're not making cars here. We're not. If you put loads of hours in and loads of practice and loads of coaching and effort, you're guaranteed to get a delivery, and that is the same in football. But my word, it's absolutely the case in golf. And so Alex had that experience of having to, which he came up with this term to me, to sort of, to have to let go of everything you've done so that you can actually get the benefits of what you've done. It sounds completely mad. To let go of everything you've done so you can get the benefits from what you've done.
Yeah, giving up control in order to gain it is everybody's experience that in golf. Because the moment when you think, I'll tell you what, sod this game, I've just hit 3 shocking shots, I'm just going to hit it. So therefore you're letting go of completely everything and you hit a perfect shot. We've all experienced that in golf. And you think, oh, maybe that's the answer. But then you try and replicate that. It doesn't quite work.
Alex? I think you've hit something there. I mean, Mark, I watched the one you did last week, and Mark touched on something and said, you've got to play like a 5-year-old, and that doesn't mean mess about.
Yeah.
That means you play to win. You play with intensity. You play with focus. Relaxed is a wrong word because there's a lax in relaxed.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee was never rigid and was always with the flow with the stream and all the rest of it. And I think to play like a 5-year-old, and the other one that you've just said there, Alex, is just not to give a damn about the result.
Yeah.
I never ever worried about the results. I got caught up in my own performance levels and judging my own performance because of outside issues with the manager and different things. But I always think, for me, it wasn't the result, it was the performance. And the manager used to say, if 7 players can play well, then we'll win the game. So you knew 2 or 3 of you weren't going to play well. So you did a job for your teammates and helped them out in different areas. Did your jobs that you could do. Creativity might not have been working, but you're going to do the basics and do them well. And then not giving a damn about the end result and about a lot of things is probably one of the best things you can probably say when you're going out to any sports occasion.
I think that extends, though, Lee. I know you've done other things in your life, but I think that extends to whether you're playing a musical instrument, whether you're in a band, whether you're doing heart surgery. Maybe heart surgeons, we might have one listening in, and they're going, no, it's absolutely meticulous. Every single cut counts. It's like, no, but I don't mean that it's not serious. Play.
No, I don't mean that at all. I don't mean that we're not there to win and we're not there to do it right.
No, absolutely.
You have to just let go of that. Let go of everything, because if you let go of everything and just do it, you've got the training, everything's in there, all the answers are in there. You just need to let it go and the right thing. You're not asking. You're not a surgeon who's not going in there to do the wrong operation, to make the wrong cut and to make the wrong decision.
Yeah,
he's going in there to do all the right things, like a footballer is, like a golfer is, like a stock market person is, like anybody is. They're going into the right thing. So if you stop thinking and just don't give a damn about anything, your mind will process the right thing that you want doing.
Yeah.
Lee, sorry, Mark. Can I just ask a question? Was there any times when you went against what the manager was saying, and so the gameplay was you were reacting a certain way as a team, you were conscious of what's going on, or you as an individual just started to go totally off piste and obviously produce something brilliant, or vice versa? What happened if it didn't work? And what was the reaction with the manager, with the team, and did that influence you in any way? Or could you give any kind of examples in matches where you kind of just, there's a moment of brilliance and you maybe gone out of position, or you've gone against the tactics maybe and reinvented in that moment?
I think Brian Robson's probably made decisions on the pitch against what the manager said to us. He spotted that there's been problems on the pitch during the game and reorganised and reshuffled the formation. And it's turned out all right. And if not, he's sort of gone to the manager, or they've had their own argument separately. I think for me, to not so much to sort of disobey orders on a pitch. My job was to get down the wing, cross them in, get on the end if the ball's coming from the right, and to help the fullback out. And when the ball's on the other side, I took in and helped the midfield out. So you're helping the whole. Those are your sort of jobs over on the left hand side. I think for me was when I got told different things and I sort of had a fallout with the manager. That was probably my best game, when I just went, right, I don't give a shit what you say. I'm just going to go out and do what I want to do and go where I want to go. And I'd be all over the pitch. I'd be running everywhere. I'd end up having a really good game. I'd do that sort of, 3, 4, 5 times on the spin. And then I get sort of sucked it back into his mentality and maybe trying to please him rather than do my own thing. Start to care too much about the fact that I've been playing well and what do I do to protect it. And then because you're cross-thinking, cross-examining yourself, you have a poor game, then your confidence starts to go and you're battling different demons in training, trying to get back to the level you were at. And all you need to do is just go, fuck it, and just do what you want, basically, because training is in there.
Can I ask a question, Lee?
Yep.
We're talking about there's a distinct difference between being in a team. I think the main difference between football and golf is that in football, obviously, there's a manager and there's this concept of there being a respect for the manager. I think that's been talked about today, and that there's a dynamism between the manager and the players. and then there's a dynamism that happens and relationship building between the players themselves, and there's a hierarchy that builds inside that, and then therefore this idea of corrupting that, or as you say, kind of perturbing that system can lead to some big benefits. And have you thought about what elements of the eccentricity that you experienced in football that you've taken with you into golf? And would you be able to can you think and elucidate on that a little bit? Can you kind of think of any?
What do you mean by the eccentricities that are brought from
Well,
football?
talk about where you were just now. Think about where you were just now, and you were reciting a moment when you broke away from conformity in the side and the way the side was structured, and you took it on yourself, either because you were kind of, not happy with yourself and you just said, no, fuck it, I'm just going to go and do this, or that you felt subconsciously this is what needed to be done, and the license was given to you effectively because Brian Robson had already done it. So in other words, you lost the structure, you lost control to gain control, or to be able to create the opportunities or affordances to be able to do something a little bit magical. Can you think about, and I tell you what, this is, for me, it's an interesting concept. I'm sure because in sport, all of us will have been playing in other sports than just golf. And those sports most likely will have involved being in a team. And what sort of elements of that do you think translates into a sport where you're just on your own, like in golf, or where you're trying to figure out a particular problem with your life or whatever, or any other sort of kind of like sort of thing where you're just doing it soulless? It could be anything, riding a bike or juggling, or whatever,
I think it's a totally different game in the fact that if you're having a bad day on a Saturday on a football pitch, you've got 10 mates that can help you out.
Yeah.
And you're only over the ball for a matter of a second at a time, whereas at golf, you've actually got to go and play the shots and you're on your own, and the onus is on you to, you're just under pressure every shot, aren't you? So I think what you would take from football is the fact that they don't give a damn attitude generally gets you the job done. So I think you'll find that most sports people put in a different sport will sort of just go, oh, well, get all blasé and go, well, I don't really care, which is trying to relax them and trying to get them out of thinking about what they're supposed to be doing. And it will hopefully free them up just to swing a club, swing a tennis racket, kick a football if you're coming to football from non-football sports. So I think that attitude seems to work, and that would be the biggest thing that I would take. That it's a hard thing to do when you're putting so much pressure on yourself that this is the most important thing in your life. When you're over a tee shot on the first, or if you're about to take a penalty, if you're on your first day at work, if you're on a first date, if it's the most important thing in your life, then you start to get nervous. If you go, do you know what, I don't care because I can get another job, I can get another girlfriend or boyfriend, it's another tee shot next hole, I can have another pass 3 seconds later. Really, does it matter?
But I guess
can I add one more thing to that? And the fact that you're probably still going to get your 500 grand a week, and I know that you were on way much more, Lee.
I wouldn't take a drop, mate.
I think there's you could almost say that there's like there's a few words that kind of sum up that kind of that area of being, which is, or meaning, which is the fact that there's a bottomless pit of energy inside all of us. That's part of life, and therefore, if you will, it's charged by this thing that we call the spirit, which is this kind of means something different to everybody. But as you're describing it, without that belief that there's always another day, there's another chance, but at the same time, that if you care too much about that moment, then you lose that moment, and it never ever gets born. So you're never in the moment. So to be in the moment, you have to forget you're in the moment. You also know that there's going to be another moment. And without that continuum, without that kind of like, if you will, that procession of trust in yourself to do something great, is that not the spirit of creativity? Is that not the spirit of invention and exploration, wouldn't you say? And that's the thing that translates into across sports and into people who want to do things just a bit differently and want to aspire to do things really as best they possibly can.
I think there's a spirit. I think there's also a love for it as well. I think when it lets you down,
Now you're
time
talking.
after time, you keep coming back to it.
Yeah, now you're talking. I think there's a
love. There's a love element to it. And
inhibition, losing inhibition, and saying, you know, let's go for this. And there's so many different kind of harmonics, isn't there, in there? There's lots of different types of inhibitions, isn't there? There's the kind of a peer group pressure, the people you're with, and what do they think? And then really, when it really matters, you don't give a damn what they think. So in other words, you actually do lose all of that constraint. You know, this is an area which I think Mark's particularly skillful at. And the other thing that I like about this, it's an area where, you know, we have to be completely uninhibited. That inhibition, you know, is actually, to me, is one of the big constructs of eccentricity. One of the things that is absolutely present with everyone I've seen in my life who are truly eccentric is they don't give a damn what you think of them. They only care what they think about themselves. And it's not particularly necessarily what you think they're thinking about either.
Can I ask Lee a question on that, just to follow on, Nick, if that's okay?
Go for it, yeah.
Lee, so you said love. You've just been having a chat about the L word. And that's, you know, that's really embarrassing, apart from the fact that nearly everybody who's involved in sport, golf, football, and all the other sports, whether they're watching now or whether they play at any level, they use that word all of the time about their relationship and how they view the sport, about how important it is to them. And they don't use a word like motivation, do they? They don't go, I'm motivated, to say, actually, I love it. So just put you on the spot, Lee. Do you really mean love?
I'm obsessed and infatuated and totally in love with the game.
Don't give us obsession as well. For heaven's sake, we'll go somewhere else.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the grounds it's played in. I love.
Now you're talking.
I love the company I keep when I'm there.
Yeah. I
love the sound of a ripped tee shot straight down the middle.
This is what it's all about. This is what it's all about.
I love the sound of a flush stick iron out the middle of the fairway.
Letting his hair down and talking about the real meaning of life, which is about.
I love listening to the ball drop to the bottom of the hole. I just, and the chat that goes on in between shots. I think it's a sensational game.
So imagine how embarrassing that is to somebody who's just arrived from Mars, right? So you just come in and they go, this guy who played high-level football at the highest level in the biggest league in the world has just been talking about playing in front of no one with his mates, and he's loving walking down this beautiful bit of parkland. He's trying to hit this ball that he never, maybe once in a round, hits properly. He could easily walk to the end of this hole and drop it in that bloody cup. And he's just described that using the words he uses about his children, about his mum, about everybody who's been really important to him, about life. He's used the same word. And I'm going to ask him again, this is an interrogation now, Lee, do you actually mean, I'm not revealing my cards, but you can probably tell where they are, do you actually mean to use that word in the same word that you would use in all those other contexts? Do you really mean love?
Oh, I absolutely totally do mean love, yeah. I'm in love with the game.
Absolutely right. Well, I tell you what, I wish you could come and save my career's over as an academic now, but it was a long time ago. But no psychologists in sport that I've come across, or very, very few, dare to write about love.
Yeah.
Isn't that outrageous? I mean, isn't that ironic, incredible, outrageous that they don't want to write about the word that the people on the ground, the people who played it at the highest level, and the people who are the people who make the damn thing up on the ground use automatically, and they know what it means.
So we're a bit shy and inhibited, aren't we? Is that a British trait? I don't know.
No, because they're not though. That's been put out by the ruling class that the British are inhibited. No, they're not. They're absolutely bloody wild.
Yeah.
Have you never seen them abroad? I have. They're completely mad.
Yeah.
They're very emotional. It's a nonsense to say that. But
Yeah.
I'm not criticising. I know exactly what you mean, Nick. But I tell you what, the amount of words of love that are spoken in pubs watching sport, I mean, that is way beyond what you hear from people who are in the inverted comma arts.
Well, I think that I'm looking at the timeline, and it's interesting actually, because if I'm right, we had the word why, the big why. Why do we do all of this? And I think it's very nice because we've actually come to what I think is the essence of this big thing we call love, the spirit of it. I know that we talked about it earlier today, Mark, but it's fantastic that this subject's come up, because as soon as you mention this word love, you have to be completely uninhibited in order to be able to say. You have to let go of all the consequences of it. And in so doing, what happens is you set yourself free and you lose all of that thing that's holding you back, and you just go for it. And I think that's fantastic. It's really good that that's kind of come up in this conversation. So we've been talking for about an hour now, and I think that going back to the MC role that I'm supposed to have, I would need to mention that there are hopefully some takeaways that people should try and think about from this particular session. So I kind of feel that to a certain extent, people should feel welcome to ask questions. Obviously, we've got half an hour to ask questions right now, but also there must be, I think, through Marcus, the opportunity, if you haven't got questions now, maybe to email or to text Marcus some questions that we can look
Nick, it's on a chat, so they can just type in a question. So we've had a question from Francis. Francis Sanderson, who trains Tom. He's a strength and conditioning coach. Hi, Tom, you all right? He's asked a question talking about coaches earlier during performance. In judo, he sees a lot of coaches giving a lot of information while the players are actually competing, causing choking, etc. And he says he has pre-agreed words that the players know and can adjust to. Did Lee have any pre-arranged language with coaches during matches?
Not sure if you can use that one.
Or signals.
No, there's never a list of words. We ran through a few sort of set pieces and who was marking who at certain set plays, and that was about it. And then it's up to the players really. The worst thing the manager can do is start shouting on from the sideline, because I'll tell you, for one, I was fortunate enough to play for like nearly 50,000 every home game, and you can't hear him anyway, which is quite a blessing. The other one, players try not to listen. And one of the best things, I played down at Arsenal with Bradford when I was at Bradford with Paul Jewell, and Paul Jewell was on the side of the pitch shouting at everyone. And Arsene Wenger came over and said, "Listen, sit down, just let them play," which I thought was like an absolutely unbelievable quote to say to any manager. And he obviously let his team do that, and they were unbelievable. And what a manager he was. So I think we don't need to say too much.
How much influence does the manager have?
During a game, not too much, to be honest. That's the role of the captain. That's why you need a good captain to be able to marshal the team and change things if they need to be changed on the pitch. But the manager does his thing before, half time, and after.
Cool. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions, just feel free to type them in, guys. What I'd also like to just touch on is there is a link on my Facebook page on Zen Golf Mechanic. Also on, if you follow through to Zen Golf Mechanic, there's a link, a Just Giving link, and we're just asking for a donation of £5 to the NHS. So it's a free web chat, obviously, but we're just asking for a donation tonight of £5 if you don't mind. So the link is on my Zen Golf Mechanic Facebook page. But you can email me and I can send you the link, or text me. But we would really appreciate any donation. But we're asking for a minimum of £5, if that's okay, in aid of the NHS. Alex let me I'd like to involve Alex in this, in talking about, we were talking to Lee there about obviously performance on the pitch in a team game with a manager. So in golf, when you're in a tournament and you're having to react to the conditions, react to your performance, just talk us a little bit about that, about how you maintain a level of performance or maintain focus, if you like. What's the skill in playing and allowing yourself to perform? We talk about skill as in skill set of playing technically, but what's the skill in actually allowing yourself to perform to your best?
I think it's a to that. So the run up, and Nick's, we've used this term numerous times, the run up to actually the shot. So the run up to the shot could be, I don't know, labelled the run up to the tournament, which all goes, it aligns with the title about performance and preparation in kind of like elite sportsmen. And I guess it all almost starts from the moment that you start traveling to a tournament. So let's just forget about all the practice that goes into the actual playing side of it. So my experience for when I was playing in kind of like tour conditions really in China, where we'd be away for like 6 or 7 weeks at a time, the kind of like the schedule would be from a Sunday night or a Monday morning, very rarely be Tuesday, would have to fly to the next tournament. And the preparation side of things starts from there. So the way that you travel, for example, has an impact ultimately on performance in trying to keep this this trend of, I guess, being professional and trying to create an optimum state of being in order to then perform. So like the way that you travel, so for example, like your hydration is still taken into account on a Sunday night or a Monday relative to when we start on the Thursday. Your nutrition, I mean, obviously going out to China, there was a massive jet lag problem, so I had to try and adjust to that in particular. And then, I don't know, you'd probably get to the hotel and you'd have to rest and then remind yourself of the philosophy that you have, because unfortunately in golf we don't really have the ability to have a manager or 10 other players to kind of build us up if we're not particularly feeling so good about our games, about maybe stuff that's going on off the course. So you've really got to be an all-rounder at the level I was playing at, where I didn't have the luxury of, having you as my coach, Marcus, or any of my other coaches being there on hand. So that's a different task in itself. So you get to the hotel, and my kind of mantra would be to rest, remind myself of the philosophy, which again I'll talk about in a second, and something that we've worked on, body scanning. So how I approach the way that my body feels relative to that week or even the previous week. I would probably go to the driving range, and my philosophy on the kind of hitting side of things would be a mind, body, and motion philosophy. So the mind side of it would be, what's my self-talk like? The body side of it would be, what does it feel like? And then the motion side of it is like kind of assessing how I'm moving at that moment in time. And then when you get to the course, probably like Tuesday or Wednesday, that would kind of like, each course would demand different levels of skill sets. So maybe it might be a course which you've either played or not played. You've got to try and develop some sort of strategy. Even the grass type might be completely different from the previous week. So you've got to try and tap into all the adjustments that you need to make. Even the wind, the prevailing wind, and trying to figure out your scorecard, not your scorecard, your yardage book, making your notes, different orientations of holes and stuff like that. So, and that the reason why I say orientations of holes, because that's a weird one for me. And I think that everyone who's a golfer who's listening into this, they will probably go to a certain driving range and maybe have a favourable way of aiming. And I found this on certain courses that I seem to favour fractionally to the right side. And when I've thought about it, I've put different courses, and often when I have decent performances, the orientation of that hole seems to be more to the right than the left. And for some reason, my results seem to be a lot more influential when the courses are set out like that for me. But yeah, so then you've gone from the range to the course to try and figure those things out. And then the phase of practice prior to the tournament. So, it's almost like the football match when you're you're having your pre kind of meeting routine, or the warm up on the field has drastically changed over the last 20 years. I get that. It might be something interesting to touch on, but the phase of practice relevant to the way that I felt, like it might have been a technical issue, or I would want to maybe, so for example, if the previous week I didn't play very well, maybe I need to focus in on, is the technique not quite right? So I try and adjust accordingly. Does my practice stimulate some sort of pressure? Is it playful? Is it artistic? And I'm trying to, at that point, trying to induce some kind of flow state as best as possible. And so that's ultimately leading up to the first tee in the tournament, and having a technique as no technique, which is a quote of Bruce Lee, which Lee touched on earlier, is sometimes easier said than done. And especially, when the gun goes, it's a case of not thinking about it and just being able to do it. So allowing freedom of movement and trusting in what you've trained, I guess, in order to optimize flow before, during, and after. And that brings me to my own philosophy, really, that before, during, and after, it might be a strange thing to say after, but by trying to train myself and create as much opportunities to optimize an altered state or flow state or love, if that's what you want to call it, beyond 18 holes, is to try and enable myself to live as optimally as possible. So by saying optimally, it means a case of, by trying to feel good, or attempting to create that stimulus inside me, which we all get from joy, love, pleasure, all those things, and not to appease the right to say that golf made me a millionaire, or I won 3 majors, or I ended up getting my European Tour card for 10 years. Because the problem is, if you have that as your goal, then you've got to be careful, because that can get in the way of actually that achievement. So I'm, at this moment of my career, I'm trying to change that and accept that if I can live optimally, then that's a great goal to have. And if by a stroke of luck that I managed to get tour and do quite well, then that's a nice consequence of that. So my goals have changed the older I've got. So I don't know if that answers your question a little bit or not.
Ask the question, just roll it back a little bit. So you're in practice because the practice session's not going particularly well, because we're talking biochemistry here. We're talking oxytocin. We're talking about this optimal flow state. We're allowing our body to use its degrees of freedom. Yeah. So what we're talking about here, guys, are swing mechanics, but we're talking about it in a way that is not conventional, because the organisation of your mechanics are very much influenced by the mind-body motion. The motion is at the end of this equation, so it's a result. So we're inducing a state which is allowing us to self-optimize, and that recognition of ourselves, of the patterns that we're making, is something that we feel that we develop a feel for. It's something that allows us to create this, in inverted commas, confidence, this very flaky confidence. So in essence, the practice is pivotal. And if we're trying to evoke a state of self-regulation in our practice design, so everybody who's watching, how could they practice better? Because practice sessions go up and down, it's turbulent. And so when you're having a dip, it could be 2 weeks before a tournament, it could be in between rounds in a tournament, it could be you've got the medal coming up on a Sunday, you go to the range on a Friday night, hit the first few balls great, and suddenly it all starts going downhill. And what do you start to do? So like Lee, maybe in a game of football, starts off really bad, maybe they let a couple of goals in, he feels like he's not performing particularly well. How do you switch that around? How do you do that in a practice session, Alex? How do you do that on the golf course and then on a football pitch?
Sorry, just ask the question again, Mark, because it fell off.
I can't repeat that one, Alex.
Oh, no, just that last 10 seconds.
So,
Can I summarise? I think that because I can see there's a few more questions here coming in, and we need to make sure that everyone gets the word in here. Well, first of all, let me think. I think I can just about summarise that, and I think that it's about the essence of maintaining life. So performance is also about making sure that you're feeling comfortable in your own life. You're doing things that you need to do, and that there's no start and finish, and that there's this idea that that we go out and purposely practice something. It's something that we maintain and we allow it to happen when it needs to happen. So it's in some respects, our call to want to to improve in these areas are coming from a natural love of wanting to play the game. I know that I'm just looking at some of these questions here. Molly's asked a question of Lee, and it's quite an interesting one, this, and it's, Lee, did you feel that having done all the work in a week and feeling like, you're really on top of the job, what did it feel like if, say, for instance, you didn't actually make the team on the Saturday, that you were denied of that? What did it do to you? Did it, what sort of, can you summarize what that feeling's like to have done all the work but then not been able to get on the pitch and express yourself?
Yeah, that was the hardest thing to take. That was crushing.
Yeah.
I had that happen to me on numerous occasions where I've been really good in training, expecting to play, and then didn't play. I've played well on a Wednesday, scored a goal, been one of the best players on the pitch, and then not played on the Saturday.
Yeah.
I've picked up man of the match awards on one game and then not been in the squad the next week.
Yeah.
And it's demoralising. It's crushing. It's hard to know what to do when you've been at your best and it's still not what they're looking for.
Did you ever feel that you could take something from it, or did you feel at the time, no, there can't be any goodness coming out of this negativity?
There's certainly a feeling of what's the point.
Yeah. So as a demoralisation that kind of crushed everything. There was no kind of, you couldn't see any kind of philosophical upside to it.
Well, no, you're peaking, aren't you? And if you're peaking and you're still,
it's kind of
sort of getting trampled on, it's quite hard to take.
Yeah, illogical. I've got another one here. Gareth Hamilton has mentioned that he was watching day 4 of Bay Hill, and the commentators were talking about Rory McIlroy's coaches. I think we know who the person concerned is, talking and advising him again to do some of the things that we've been talking about tonight, which is sort of like letting go of the control in order to gain the control, that kind of thing. I think that it's fair to say that all of us have seen quite an interesting change in Rory's demeanour and the way he comes across. There's something that seems to be affecting, even when he's talking to camera, he just seems to be a little bit more sort of like sussed out and more comfortable in his own skin. So that's a great question from Gareth. And I think that I would really be, I think we'd all be very much in support of whatever he's doing at the moment. I think it's good advice. Jenny Smith has asked Alex, do you meditate a lot? Is it part of your routine? And does gratitude come into the equation at all?
This is what I was alluding to earlier with Alex with your practice.
Yeah. Well, back to, I know we discussed it last week, and it is available to view on Marcus's page again. But with regards to that, in essence, the meditation is kind of changing your own physiology into more of a coherent state. So whether you want to use the term meditation or you practice it via using the heart math application or anything that kind of, even just by walking out in nature and just being able to breathe, is kind of a form of that. And that is definitely something that I do quite often. And it is a part of me trying to get into that optimal state or that flow state, however you want to describe it, when I'm on the driving range or whether I'm walking to the first tee. And that walk to the first tee into a tournament is, and I'll quote more with you introducing more earlier, longest walk in golf. So that walk to the first tee, by understanding your own physiology and feeling that change in sensation and understanding how to actually do that. It's all right feeling it, but you need to have the tools and the understanding of how to actually apply that in order to make the actual change, because that then probably is a good way for Matt to come in. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to talk positive to yourself, because we've all talked positive to ourselves and almost not really meant it. We're trying to fake it in order to make it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the feelings create the thoughts, and then the thoughts create the feelings. And more often than not, to be honest, they are negative. And I don't know why that is, kind of like in our human nature at this moment in the history of time. But it kind of, we all allude to the negative as opposed to the positive. So that's why I think it's so important to have an understanding of yourself in order to optimize your state of being.
But I think the bedrock of all of this really is authenticity, which is effectively, there's only one person that you would foolishly tell a lie to, and that's yourself.
Yeah.
I think that goes, I'm sure that Lee and everybody, that must be something that we've come across. Jenny goes on to say that, happiness, and we talk about love and all the rest of it, an intrinsic part of being in the state. I think that's a very good point, Jenny. I think that, we're all doing this for a reason, and certainly one thing I'm sure that the stream that goes all the way through this is that if we're in that state of contentment and freedom, then we're in a spirit, we're feeling love, and we're feeling happiness, we're feeling all of the fantastic benefits that go with that, and the byproducts are that essentially the body becomes something that kind of like does what it wants to do, and generally speaking, it wants to be doing things really, really well. That's contentment, isn't it, which follows those states? And so I think that's a good question. Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions. Oh, sorry, Mark, if you want to.
No, just I think we've got a topic there for another one, which is the reality of every human being, performance sport or anywhere else, is that you don't live in flow and in love and in the good place most of the time. We're talking here about getting more of that. Because what Alex is talking about is being able to deliver when you're anxious, when you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think we need another session, which is, that's my area of my PhD, that's my specialism.
Yeah.
I've actually been able to deliver when you are anxious, and all the meditation in the world will not remove that completely from the human condition. We're talking about trying to reduce it, or the frequency of it. But Lee's played, I've performed, you've performed in our different domains when we've not felt that comfortable and still found a way to do well. Not brilliant, not excellent, but well. So that's another dimension. That's what we talked about last week about, positive thinking will not be strong enough all of the time.
I think, and Jace is, and it's also Kev, have asked questions which are fairly similar. Hi Kev, hi Jace, coach with Kev, and Jace down in Liverpool. Kev's asked a question about, for Lee, do the games that you played well in seem to fly by, and the games did some games drag? And did you let things just flow in both situations? As a team, you scored a lot of late goals. Was that trusting your skill or just playing? And as like an addition to that, Jace has asked. He's asked about during performance. If you were, how did you negate any self-talk, any negative self-talk, negative chatter? How did you kind of reset or just get on with the task in hand? So if your performance was bringing your mood down, and you were out of this utopian flow state, how did you turn that around and perform? Be interested to get Lee and Alex's opinions on this from golf and football.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, that was always part of the battle. If you've had a couple of not so good games and you're low in confidence and you're under pressure because the manager's been nailing you, and that's where you got to dig in. But for me, it was always just keep things simple before you go and try and be over elaborate. It was get a good first touch, pass it to someone in a red shirt that's 5 yards away, and go on a run and try and get it back. And it was building basics. Once my first touch had worked a few times, and I could see my short range passenger was coming out, and my timing had come in. My timing, my awareness of the situation and what was going on, everything started to grow, and then you sort of can get into a game. Sometimes it takes a bit longer. Sometimes it never comes, and you just can't pass to a red shirt. You can't control it properly. But for me, it's always been just stick to the basics before you do anything massively create. You don't try and beat 2 or 3 players or put your foot over the ball and do a trick or do something special when your timing's not on and you're not in that flow state. So you just keep it simple.
That brings me to another question, which is from Danny, which I think is related to what you've just been talking about. And obviously, I think that it crosses over massively with what Mark's suggesting is a topic for another session, which I completely agree with, which is, you know, how do you operate in severe mental chaos? And Danny's asking the question, I think, to both Lee and to Alex, how much does playing well, how much of it is it down to sound fundamentals such as grip, posture and technique? And me and Lee talked about this yesterday. How much of it is it down to that? How much can you rely on that as being the thing that actually gets you there, as opposed to, say, the maintenance of a good, solid mental state? Is it possible to be really good at golf if you are mentally equipped but have poor technique? And the same with football, Lee. Is it possible to, you know, to deliver with pretty scabby technique but with an absolutely sensational mental approach?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement with that.
I think if you've got an unbelievable brain, I've played against handicapped golfers that are nowhere near a handicap level as good as me, but can get round and can beat me because they're sensible at certain times. They know what shots they've got in the locker. They know they can place the limitations, and footballers as well.
Yeah.
There's been footballers that you would say that have limited ability that just know their own game and do it really, really well.
What's it like?
A strong mind or a clever mind.
What's it like, Lee, stepping on the first tee in golf compared to walking out at Anfield? Man U against Anfield, big game, compared to standing on that first tee in the Trilby Tour. How do you feel?
Oh, it's ridiculous. I used to get nervous before every game I played anyway, football-wise. But golf, palms are sweaty, hands shaking, can't get the ball on the tee, knees are knocking, short of breath, dry mouth, cold sweat.
We're only
a quick beer.
a quick bit. Well, funnily enough, some of the lads used to take a shot of brandy before they went out on the pitch, which I think was for that sort of thing, just calm the nerves a bit.
Yeah. The interesting thing, Marcus mentioned this thing about oxytocin, which is quite interesting. I think that the story behind oxytocin is quite sensational when you think about it, because like when we get really stressed out, then, you know, our veins start to contract, and particularly the ones going into the hearts, where it's kind of like the central function. A lot of people kind of feel that the heart is at the mercy of the brain, and what we're beginning to realize now is that it's the other way around. That, you know, that the heart's really at the focal point of all of this in terms of regulation of the system. And the thing about this oxytocin thing, which is, I think, is something that can be actually nurtured, and certainly they call it the love hormone. And what it does is it kind of it does the opposite. It opens the arteries around the heart and the sensory system around the heart, and it lets the heart free. And you know, there are invocations that you can do that are really very, very powerful. And I know that when we touch on this subject with you know, in another session that's going to be run by Mark on this subject, I think it's going to be an interesting discussion to look at the physiology of psychology and what they call the non-physical side of psychology. I think most people think about psychology as being just purely unphysical. And I think we're clearly beginning to realize now part of holistics is that there is no separation, that we are a body that's made up of a mind. And it's all as one big thing. It's one big chemistry set. And it's this idea of having segmentalization and compartments, you know, he's great physically, but he's absolutely crap mentally, or the other way around, or he's fantastic mental. I think that it'd be interesting, and I know it's absolutely true, and we've talked about it tonight, that at the moment, I think if we were to say what we would rather have, and as Lee's expressed it, and I'm sure, you know, Alex, you would be in agreement with this, that, you know, that to have a head that's coherent and to have you know, everything firing upstairs has got to be worth many more of the hours sweating on a practice ground, you know, thinking that's going to do the job. I think that some of the stuff and information that Mark's got is so valuable for everybody moving forward, because it's the quickest way to get to a point where you feel you can actually start to deliver on this pathway of development and progress. And that, without that encouragement, you know what, we're just lost, aren't we? We do need to have some kind of shot in the arm. Without that, it's kind of tough, isn't it? As Lee mentioned, you know, life can be freaking cruel and absolutely illogical, and that can be crushing. And that crush is irrelevant, and how we manage all of those things. And as Alex says, how we manage the time between the games of golf, the getting to the airport, the getting out of the airport, the hydration bit, the maintaining the mind and the body together. I love the idea of Mark doing a session on trying to explain to people a little bit more about what we mean by the mental side and psychology, and how in actual fact it's got so many misinterpretations, and it's created so much more confusion. And I think there's a great opportunity for Mark to be able to talk more about that and bring us up to speed on, and try to unpick those misconceptions, because they are incredibly damaging, really damaging. So I think it'd be great, Marcus, if we could try and you know, try and summing up like that, and maybe suggest that part of this closing part of this session is for us to signpost also those people who stuck with us, and thank you very much for that. There's been a great number of people who've tuned in tonight. They stayed with us all the way through, asked us some great questions. So it's coming to the end of the session, and as part of this, we need to say that there will be other sessions. We've got some really excellent stuff in the pipeline, along the lines of the stuff that we've just been talking about. But I also, you know, I'm very I had a conversation with Peter Ball today. Peter's agreed to come on the session. I've also spoken to his opposite number in France, a guy called Bill Owens, who's an absolute rebel. Everyone's going to love the session with Bill and Peter. I've also spoken to Howard Bennett, who was the Irish national coach at the time when all of those great players were coming through, like McGinley, Harrington, Darren Clark, Powell, all of those kids, all punching above their weight. So we've got Howard Bennett, who's agreed to come on and talk about how he managed to do that. Most of us listening to this probably won't even know who the hell Howard Bennett is. And you're going to be absolutely fascinated about how some of the tactics and some of the concepts that he employed, and also how he was really swimming upstream in order to be able to deliver that as well. And in some cases, it meant him even threatening to resign from the job if they weren't going to support it. And one of those players that came into question was Harrington, who went on to become a double Open champion. And if it wasn't for Howard Bennett, then he would have had his grants withdrawn from the Irish Union, and he would have never become a player. He would have become an accountant. So yeah, we've got many people who we know who are very interesting and coming from a different perspective and adding different things to it. So we're very sort of very privileged and very fortunate about that. It's beginning to come through. For tonight, as we wrap up, I know there's more questions. We'll certainly do our very best to answer those and get people happy on that side of things. It leaves me now to thank everybody for taking part, particularly the people who have given up the time tonight to talk about, you know, their inner feelings and their expertise and giving it their slant and all the rest of it. So big thank you for Marcus, big thank you for Mark, for Lee, and for Alex. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. And please, you know, you're welcome to throw questions into Marcus's channel. Keep in tune with what we're trying to do. We really do welcome your feedback. We welcome ideas for shows and stuff like that. And we're very happy to keep the thing going.
Yeah, and please donate as well.
And donate as well, yes, absolutely. All right,
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Cheers, Nick. Cheers, Marcus. Nice to meet you, Mark.
Cheers, Mark. Cheers, Ali.
And
Nick. Thanks for
Belty,
watching,
you still
everyone.
have me £100.
Bye, everybody.
Oh,
I
Alex,
think I should
thank
apologise. I'm not, Mark. You might have to correct me on this one. Is it York Castle or is it York Cathedral walls we were sat on when we had that first
No, it
cycle?
was York walls. Yep, you're right. The walls.
There isn't a castle in York, is there? Or am I just making that
There
up?
is Clifford's Tower, but it was the walls in the city. They're 2 miles long. You're spot on. It was walk on the walls.
Right. And secondly, is when Lee finished birdie at Motown for £100. I've still not got over it, and I still owe you the £100 because he was a princess and he won't take all the £100 in £1 coins.
You still haven't paid him. You bloody. That's a disgrace.
I had £100 in £1 coins, and that wasn't good enough. So well,
Oh, right.
I have to wait for it then. That was about 2.5 years ago.
right, we'll stop this chat before it takes a very different turn.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks for taking part. Good night.
No,
Stay safe.
thank you.